The smell hit me first, a cloying sweetness laced with something metallic and rotten. It wasn't sewer gas, not the usual stagnant piss and shit familiar to any man who'd walked these iron arteries. This was different, unnatural. "Something ain't right, Mike," I rasped, my voice echoing in the damp silence of the tunnel. "This ain't natural, Mike." The young rookie partnered with me, just gave a nervous nod, wiping sweat from his brow. He was a quiet one, mostly, with watery blue eyes that seemed to take in every shadow and crevice of this labyrinthine hell. I figured he was just scared, like most of the new guys. The city sewer system had a way of doing that to a fella. It ate away at your soul. We tracked the stench to a newly opened tunnel, a section of forgotten pipes, long sealed off, moss-caked the brickwork, creepers growing from the cracks. It felt wrong, the air heavy and silent, as if the tunnel itself was holding its breath. "What do you think, Frank?" Mike asked, his voice tight. He was fiddling with a worn copy of, was that a grimoire? He was way too young for that kind of crap. "Don't know," I muttered. The picture of my wife faded with years, and grime clutched in my fist, maybe some fancy flood drain. They figured we didn't need, let's take a look. The deeper we went, the worse the smell got. The air itself felt thick, as if breathing was taking effort. God, my lungs burned. I hated this godforsaken place. It was a mirror, reflecting the rot and decay of the city above. No light pierced the gloom, only the oily slick of our helmet lamps. The silence was oppressive, broken only by the drip, drip, drip of water, like tiny, relentless hammers against stone. Then I saw it, a glyph carved into the wall. Deep, jagged lines that seemed to writhe and shimmer in the faint light. Gods, I'd seen these before, in the old libraries my gran took me to when I was a kid. Forbidden things, they called them. Whispers of ancient powers and horrors beyond human comprehension. "Mike," I breathed, my voice hoarse. "These ain't sewer codes." Mike, his face pale, held up the grimoire. "I think I know what they are," he whispered, his voice trembling. "They're warnings." A growl, deep and unsettling, resonated through the tunnel. We weren't alone, we weren't safe. Something was watching us, waiting. My hand instinctively tightened. Around the wrench I always carried, the shadows ahead darkened. A form began to drift into view, vast and vaguely humanoid, but wrong, twisted, a mockery of flesh and metal. Glowing eyes like molten gold, locked onto us. "Run!" Mike didn't need telling twice. He bolted, but the creature reacted instantly, its long, sinuous limbs lashing out. I swung the wrench, catching it on one of its fleshy appendages. It cried out. A sound like nails on a chalkboard, and more shadows detached themselves from the darkness, flanking us. We were trapped. I fought like a cornered rat, fueled by a primal fear I hadn't felt since my wife died. We used the tunnels, its tight spaces and narrow passages. To our advantage, rocks, piping, anything we could grab. We used it to parry their attacks, but they were relentless. Their numbers growing, the stench filling our lungs, choking us. Mike, his eyes wild, held up the grimoire again. He was frantically muttering something I couldn't understand. Gods, I thought. This kid's lost it. But then he stopped, his face etched with a terrifying clarity. "It's a gateway," he rasped, pointing to a massive, pulsating orb in the cavern. Beyond the shadows, a door to something unspeakable. He stared at the glyphs he'd deciphered. The sacrifice, Sacrifice, I spat, dodging a lashing tentacle. "What the hell are you talking about?" "This abomination," he gestured at the creature. "It's a guardian to seal the gateway. A soul has to be offered," he said, an almost manic glint in his eyes. It has to be willing. His gaze met mine. Just you and me, Frank. It needs a human, a willing offering. He lunged towards the pulsating heart of the orb, his face contorted with a terrifying mix of desperation and fanaticism. Just as Mike reached the edge of the gateway, a vision flashed before my eyes, not of hellfire and demons, but of my wife's face. She smiled. Wasn't that right? My choice wasn't forced. Someone always agreed. That was all it took for the darkness to spread. My gut churned. This wasn't right. Mike was going mad, playing with forces he couldn't comprehend. The darkness he sought wasn't some power to be wielded. It was a bottomless pit that consumed everything. I couldn't let him. Not like this. Not for this. My wrench flew in a whirlwind of metal, slamming into Mike's shoulder, pushing him back just as he reached the edge. He crashed to the ground. His eyes blazed with hatred. Frank, you bitch. I wanted to apologize, to explain. Hell, I was confused myself. But then I saw the creature, a titanic shadow, gathering at the edge of the orb. It throbbed, pulsating with the gate's energy, its eyes fixed on Mike. The stench was unbearable now, a wave of flesh and oil and decay. I had to make a choice, and just like the city above, I knew that choice had been made for me already. Those glyphs, those whispers of sacrifice, they weren't just about appeasing the creature. They were about sealing the damn thing away. I limped over to Mike, his body twitching as the monstrous tendrils reached towards us. Sleep now, Mike, I choked out. The picture of my wife falling out of my hand. His blue eyes stared up at me, vacant. Just sleep. He didn't answer. The creature let out a roar, echoing through the tunnels, then retreated back into the shadows. The pulse of the orb slowed, then faded. Silence fell once again. I didn't know how long I stayed there, clutching Mike's cold hand. The smell of rot etched into my soul. The city waited above, oblivious to the terror it had almost unleashed, and I was left with the knowledge that the city's darkness hadn't been saved. It had been contained, but the sacrifice had to be made. And sometimes there were certain evils that demanded a greater darkness to fight them.